Hey everybody. For a while I've muddled over how to handle Wastrel and Frontier, since both of these crews have been out for years and I don't play either of them. It felt disingenuous to give long-form advice based on my inexperienced speculation, but I also didn't want to skip them entirely, so I decided to go with short mini-reviews of just what I think of the new options and a few out-of-keyword choices I've considered. As always, before we begin, if you aren't familiar with my rating system, you should watch the explanation linked in the video description. Remember, anything stated in this video is ultimately my own opinion and blah blah. This is almost certainly not the first time you're hearing this, and the video isn't 40 minutes long this time, so please subscribe, let me know what you think, and let's get straight into Wastrel. Taking inventory. Wastrel is a fast-moving and flexible, if somewhat fragile crew. Its primary keyword feature is attaching artifact upgrades to friendly Wastrels or minions by consuming scrap or corpses, and later passing those artifacts amongst themselves. Passing an artifact costs a model their bonus action, but any receiving model gains fast if it activates later in the same turn. Early in the game, Wastrel tries to create their own scrap for a couple upgrades, and later markers are plentiful, but McCabe would rather use his actions offensively, leading to significant decision making. Their second keyword feature is looted supplies, drawing a card when a Wastrel activates near a scrap or corpse. Between this and the Fated Mirror artifact, Wastrel can cheat a large amount of cards every turn. The other upgrades are Time-Worn Blade, the offensive one which allows the carrier to ignore the most common defensive abilities, and Phantasmal Mask, a defensive artifact mainly for healing the bearer or spreading shielded to allies. As a quick summary of the current keyword choices, Sadir is a tactical nuke launcher with Blow It to Hell and Swagger. Desper and Hucksters are the crew's scheming linchpins, and Ruffians are generally worthless, honestly. In 10 Thunders, McCabe usually hires an offensive rushdown crew, equipping the faction's excellent high-cost minions like Jorogamo and Samurai with artifacts and letting them tear the enemy up while schemers do their job. In the past, this build could sometimes suffer from bad turn 1 hands, since it relies on moderate masks to create scrap with Hucksters, but has significant strengths and flexibility too. Explorer Society doesn't have offensive beatstick minions that synergize with McCabe as well as the 10 Thunders ones, but the faction brings much more consistent scrap generation and a different set of out-of-keyword models and upgrades. I think in Explorers, McCabe will be brought out with a mobility-based crew and play in a more stay-away schemy style, as opposed to 10 Thunder's dangerous rushdown. New keyword choices. Jesse Halliday, 7-cost henchman. Jesse is a slow scrap creator and anti-schemer with some inconsistent potential for generating soulstones. I went over the problems with Jesse in the Versatile video, so this will just be a quick summary for McCabe. Final verdict? In keyword, 1 star. Explorers have some of the best scrap creators available for McCabe, and some much better options for removing enemy markers. Wastrel also has better and more mobile shooting options with Rough Riders. In 10 Thunders, I can see Jesse being a more consistent scrap option to equip your Jorogamo and Samurai early on, so there I would rate her 3 stars, but as far as Explorer Society goes, I think you leave her at home. Rough Rider, 7-cost minion. The Rough Rider is your quintessential all-rounder in pretty much everything but frontline bulk. His big weakness is fragility. 5-4 defensive stats is not hard to force hits on, and 7 health will quickly go to 0 from a dedicated offensive. Kick Up Dust and favorable terrain does help, as when benefiting from one or both, the Rough Rider can probably take 2 focused shots before death, a total of 4 effective AP used to kill him. However, most good range threats can ignore or cancel concealment and cover in one way or another, so don't expect this to always save them. Lastly, Survivalist helps them recover health quickly. This synergizes with their own heal, Life Leech on Phantasmal Mask, and out-of-keyword healing, especially with the Intrepid Aura since the benefit gets literally doubled, although it's tough for a rider with a job to do to stay near the emissary. The rider's main way of staying alive is to stay at his maximum long range using his excellent mobility. Move 6, ignoring severe terrain, and 2 movement-based bonus actions make the Rough Rider an excellent flanking schemer who can contribute to combat and move to objective zones simultaneously. Kick Up Dust provides concealment to himself and allies while also moving slightly. It can also drop severe terrain onto a model while moving out of combat, freeing the rider but leaving the enemy stuck. Ride With Me is one of the best movement actions in the game. You give usually around 6 inches of movement to an ally, and potentially up to 10 inches when including base sizes and max range, and you could trigger a 1-2-3 heal on tomes. The heal's short range is deceptive, since it applies after the movement for a total 8-inch range. Alternatively, if you fail to duel with a tome, the trigger is still valid and the rider can heal himself or a much closer friendly model. While helping allies with movement or scheming, the rider can use his AP to ping enemies with his 14-inch gun, generally the longest base range for an attack. The built-in plus makes winning duels on the flip reliable or cancels either concealment or friendly fire, something that I consider a necessity for a shooting model to be good. The damage track is low, but the attack is more for reliable ping shots or targeting models in the back rather than raw damage. Critical strike boosts the damage to a very respectable 3-4-5. This attack makes the rider a great candidate for Fated Mirror. It's easy for him to carry a focus and attack twice every turn, letting him draw lots of cards and possibly hit more ram triggers too. His fragility makes him a priority target for the opponent, so being able to cheat every defensive duel as well and draw even more cards there is excellent. Trampling Hooves is a decent attack. It suffers from a 0-inch range, but the rider easily has the mobility to make that a non-issue. The injured it applies is highly sought after in a keyword which almost exclusively targets defense and has a lot of speed. Ideally, this can let the rider apply injured early in a turn and then have the rest of the crew collapse on that model and capitalize on it. The low damage track and lack of triggers hurts his effectiveness as a primary attack though. Time-Worn Blade can be used just fine when needed, but the rider isn't built to rush into combat and deal big damage. Lastly, Home on the Range doesn't do much, but note that it also gives an extra inch or two of movement to whoever the Rough Rider carries on first turn. Final verdict? In keyword, 4 stars. The Rough Rider is a good model, and the additional Ride With Me enables others like Sadir without having to rely on McCabe himself to carry them. The maneuverability and ranged attacking that Rough Riders bring is what enables Wastrel to operate in a more freeform, schemy way as opposed to Ten Thunder's big minion rushdown, since Explorers don't have a consistent min damage 3 minion to abuse Time-Worn Blade with. Out of keyword, 1 star. Explorers have much better out of keyword options for healing, shooting, scheming, and providing concealment. They shouldn't spend 8 stones on this fragile model. Cryptologist. 6-cost minion. The Cryptologist is a somewhat cheap, durable, strange support model and ranged blaster. His main mechanic is manipulating start of activation effects with ancient technology and antique timepiece. The former is a small aura that can shut down effects. Immediately this makes me think of Catalyst and Regeneration, but the Cryptologist isn't going to have a ton of control over where his aura applies due to his slow speed. Preventing or dealing a few extra points of damage during an entire game could make the difference, but certainly isn't a selling point. I don't think the ability is good. Even a model who relies on their activation abilities like Yan Lo can stay out of range or discard a card with proper planning. To be good, this aura would need to affect multiple models, but the Cryptologist isn't tanky enough to survive when surrounded. Let me know in the comments if I'm not thinking of a keyword which is really hampered more by this aura. The latter I mentioned before is Crypto's only bonus action, and lets him redo the start of activation effects on a friendly model. It unfortunately requires a 9 though, making it unlikely to succeed without cheating. In Wastrel, the idea is to target a friendly model who has already activated and received an upgrade this turn to give them fast next turn and hopefully draw a card with looted supplies. That's pretty good on highly impactful models like Sadir and Desper, but it does require consideration for activation order and the aforementioned 9. The mask trigger is an obey that requires ending a condition first. It's unreliable as condition removal, so shielded from Phantasmal Mask or Intrepid Emissary will probably pay the cost, unfortunately adding more required setup for this action to perform ideally. As a scrap creation mechanism, this obey is awful, being even more unlikely than the Huckster's required 6 mask. I've gone through all the Explorers models to try to abuse this action, and I only see Dr. Bibe and Meredith as good candidates. Bibe gets to trade the 9 for 2 weak tomes, but it's hard to get a condition on him for the mask trigger. Meredith replaces an extra husk and heals herself for 1. Stats-wise, 5/5 defenses are average, while 6 armor plus 1 health keeps him out of one-shot range and is durable against throwaway attacks. Immune to Hazardous is good in certain matchups. It's a great defensive kit on a model which isn't a priority to kill, but will go down to a dedicated assault like any other mid-cost minion would. His slow movement could be crippling, but in Wastrel it just means he'll be carried around by the cavalry and left in a central place next to a scrap marker. Ignoring Severe is good, it could be necessary in some situations, but for the most part will usually go unused. Finally, Clockwork Arm is your usual throwaway attack, but Cursed Translation has potential. It can be thrown out to ping multiple enemies for 1 damage, which can be useful against hard to kill or high armor. or it can be used with a focus to deliver a great 3 damage blast on Severe. The trigger is nothing special, but welcome when it happens. The unfortunate bit is that hard to kill and armor 2 are already handled by Time-Worn Blade, and Sadir is much better for using Severes and being a shooter blaster in general due to his damage track and triggers. Not every list will have Sadir though, and notably Cursed Translation targets willpower, which is extremely rare in Wastrel and nice to have. Final verdict? In keyword, 2 stars. I just don't see in what matchup or in what objective pool the Cryptologist brings something new and strong to the table for Wastrel. Desperate or Hucksters can usually wait to activate late and if needed catch an upgrade for fast. Sadir already gets enough attacks to spend all his focused and may be better served by a Hopeful Prospect, 2 Soulstones for masks, and an extra 9 or higher in hand than 1 additional action. As far as I can see, no model Wastrel wants can really take advantage of the Cryptologist's kit to such a degree that it's worth spending the 6 cost, even B-Bay. Out of keyword, 2 stars. In Cadmus, the Cryptologist is easily a 3 or 4 star choice, so expect to see him there, but everywhere else he isn't very useful. New out of keyword choices. As always, this can't be an exhaustive list. These are just 3 of the best unique synergies for Wastrel, particularly the first 2 for generating scrap. The first choice, which I believe to be an auto-take, is B-Bay and Calypso. B-Bay can create scrap consistently with any tome, and Luna can help B-Bay with scrap later if he needs to resummon Calypso. B-Bay's scrap creation also applies injured, and Calypso's attack trigger is great for leaving enemies without cover, concealment, or friendly fire. Best of all, Calypso has a great defensive stat line and armor too, giving Wastrel a sorely needed tanky model. It can also be healed by a Rough Rider, and the tomes drawn by B-Bay can be used for those heals if Calypso doesn't use them. The amount of card draw Wastrel can achieve ensures the pair always have tomes to cheat or other low cards to discard for deep discovery. The only downside is that neither B-Bay nor Calypso can get artifacts, but that's hardly consequential because you'll have plenty of other Wastrels and minions that can. The second choice I want to mention is the Deva. On turn 1 he can copy Luna's scrap creation with Mimic, and later on in the game his slow movement is offset by being carried around by the cavalry. He can use Time-Worn Blade with any melee attack that he mimics off of a friendly model or enemy model. In Wastrel, the best things to mimic is Sadir's gun, or the Rough Rider melee attack, which lets them place and then immediately get an additional attack from Made to Kill. They also get an additional attack out of activation whenever they get Ride with Mead by a Rough Rider or McCabe himself. He provides concealment around himself for allies, and when in base contact with enemies he gives -1 defense from Latch On. Remember that Wastrel only targets defense, so this is particularly good in this keyword. The downsides are the Deva does cost 8 stones, and it could be difficult to get him into combat with his 4 move, even with the cavalry, since the Rough Riders generally don't want to get close, and McCabe might just run away from him because he has 3 AP to use. Lastly, once the Deva is engaged with something, it's going to be very difficult to shoot it because you're suffering from concealment and friendly fire. And then we have the Botanist. The Botanist is a minion, so he can get artifacts, and he can easily grow twice on turn 1, using a scrap marker consumed by Luna, followed by a scrap marker consumed by McCabe. Like I said, I expect McCabe to go with a more fast, schemy playstyle, and Botanists fit right into that, because they're extremely fast, and they're going to be hard to kill with 7/6 defenses. If you give them Fated Mirror, they can cheat every defense and willpower duel, and at 7/6 defense and willpower, they're pretty much only going to die to a lucky shot. And finally, spreading Injured with their Shockwave could do well to help your other things attack. The downside is that the Botanist doesn't have a lot of damage output, so you're really going to be relying on pushing things, staggering them, slowing them, and so on, and just completing your schemes without really getting into combat much. And with that, we finish the Wastrel mini-review. Personally, I think 10 Thunders got some good new tools and remains the best faction to play Wastrel in, but Explorer's McCabe is certainly viable. Let me know what you think below, and as always, I look forward to seeing you next time.
Have some goddamn faith!